friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be talking about the fern leaf cactus and sharing my tips and tricks on how I get mine to grow amazingly like this one. But before I get into all of that, I want to say if you're new here and you don't know me already, hi, my name is Emma and I make houseplanting content all over the internet. So if you want to follow along with my houseplanting journey and maybe learn something along the way, stick around, watch some more of my videos, and subscribe to my channel. If you're not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate it. And let's start talking about the fern leaf cactus. The Latin name for the fern leaf cactus is Selenicereus Chrysocardium. It used to be classed as an epiphyllum, but it is no longer that, though I have seen them still be sold as epiphyllum Chrysocardium, so keep a lookout for that. But honestly, if you search fern leaf cactus, you'll probably be able to find one of these online. They have recently become much more popular, especially in the UK. They're much more readily available here now. This was a wish list plant for me last year in 2023, and I was luckily able to get my hands on one in March time, but it is absolutely stunning. I am so glad I've added this to my collection. Basically, as soon as I saw these beautiful kind of fern-like mermaidy vibe leaves online, I was like, I knew I had to have this plant, and I tried to get it as quickly as possible. And at the time it was a lot harder to find. Nowadays they are, like I said, pretty readily available, which is awesome. I'm so excited for more and more people to be having these because they are absolutely phenomenal plants. They're fairly easy, and it is like quite a jungle vibes plant, which does make sense. It is a jungle cactus or an epiphytic cactus, an orchid cactus. Those all typically mean the same thing, and it originates from Mexico. Typically, because it is epiphytic, it will grow on trees, not actually in soil. But in our homes, we grow them in soil because I don't have any trees for it to hang off of here. But if you want to mount yours, you can. I personally haven't. I like mine how it is in its pot, just hanging down, giving these amazing jungly vibes. Actually, fun fact as well, the fern leaf cactus doesn't actually have leaves. These are not leaves, they're something called cladodes, which is a modified stem where the stem flattens out into these leaf-like shapes, and they act as leaves as well and will photosynthesize from these bits. But these parts are not actually leaves, they're cladodes. Pretty cool, huh? There's no leaves on this at all. It's just a bunch of really weird flat stems. I find that information really cool and interesting. I wasn't expecting that. I thought that these were leaves, but they're not. So the more you know. Cleo has decided that she wants to be a part of this video now, so she might sit on my lap and make some appearances throughout. So because in nature, in their natural habitat, fern leaves grow in trees and like kind of up in just below the canopy level of the tree line, they're actually not getting very much direct sun. Even though this is classified as a cactus, it is a jungle cactus, and so bright, direct, long hours of hot sun that you might give to a desert cactus will not do for this one, and I would not recommend putting it in a situation like that. They'd much prefer like medium to bright indirect light. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. They can tolerate some shorter hours of sunlight when the sun is less hot, so like very early morning sun, late afternoon sun, or like dappled throughout the day kind of thing. They'll be absolutely fine with that, but they don't need that. They'll be perfectly fine growing in that sort of medium light. Or I grow mine almost exclusively under grow light. It is in an area in my home that's kind of recessed away from a window, so it's not getting much natural light at all throughout the day, but it is getting 12 to 15 hours of grow light, and it seems to be liking that still. It is putting out new growth regardless of the amount of light. Cleo, hey baby, can you get down from there please? Down please, thank you. Cleo. If you want the box, you can do it in the other room. What was I saying? Light, yeah. I have this one under grow light most of the day, and it is growing absolutely fine. I'm not worried about it in the slightest. And so if you do have a slightly darker corner but with a grow light, that could be a good option for this one as well. Unlike desert cactus, jungle cactus like this fern leaf here will not tolerate drying out as much as its deserty cousins. They prefer to stay a little bit more moist. Their ideal is when they get watered when their soil is about 75% dry, not fully drying out. Because I do have this one hanging in my home, it doesn't get as much water as I possibly could. I have actually very recently put it into a pot that will make it easier to water so I can give it more water, but I have been letting it dry out completely and trying not to let it sit fully dry too often. But it sometimes does happen, and it hasn't been the end of the world for it, so they are a little bit more drought tolerant, but they would definitely prefer to be watered slightly more often. Not super duper frequently, but my best way of telling whether or not it needs water is one, lifting the plant and feeling how heavy it is, or sticking my finger into the soil or a moisture meter and using that to see how moist the soil is. And if it is dry, I will tend to water, and if it is wet, I won't. Also, with the fern leaf, it'll actually tell you when it is too dry as well. Their cladodes, these bits, will get really, really floppy and flexible, so you can very well tell if they are too thirsty and give them a drink then. But I would avoid letting it get to that point too much because it could cause your plant to not grow as well. So if you want the best growth of your plant, try not to let it get too wilty like that. I also highly recommend not sticking to a time-based schedule when you're watering your fern leaves and your plants in general, because it will change throughout the year depending on the season, your home, the amount of light it's getting, the amount of humidity in the air. And so I find checking the soil to be the best way to figure out when to water your plants. Instead of I water every Monday, I will water when the soil is X amount dry. That is a better way to do it, in my opinion, because you won't risk over watering as much, which is when you water the plant before it's ready to be watered rather than like putting too much water in the pot at once. As long as it's able to drain out completely, you should be fine with its watering, and just don't water it again too soon. Because they are native to jungles, they do like it fairly warm, between like 16 and 25 Celsius, which is I think like 60 to 77 Fahrenheit would be their ideal, especially during the summer months. And during the winter months, they can tolerate cooler, something like 13 to 16 Celsius, or ooh, what's that, 55 to 60 Fahrenheit will do for them. Also, given I have not experienced this personally, but I have heard allowing them a cooler period over the winter time in that lower range, the 13 to 16 degree range Celsius, will help promote them to bloom and flower, which I personally haven't experienced that with this one. I'll insert a picture of what their flowers look like because they are really stunning, and maybe one day I can get my fern leaf to flower. That would be so cool if I could, but I'm not gonna hold my breath on it because they, one, need to be mature, and two, they do enjoy that period of dormancy over the winter time. But they don't need it. It's not necessary for them to continue growing. And let's be honest, I'm not in this one for the flowers. I'm in it for this sort of foliage, if you can call it that, even though it's not leaves. I don't need the flower, but it would be cool to try and grow one day. Fern leaf cactuses also like it fairly humid, again, because they're from the jungle. So 60 to 80% humidity is ideal for them. And if you can keep it in that range, great. My home is typically within that realm of 60 to 70% depending on the time of year. I live in the UK and it is quite humid a lot of the time, and I have a lot of plants in my home, so it just naturally stays quite humid. But if your home isn't that humid and you need to boost it, you can do so by bringing plants together, using something like a pebble tray, or my best recommendation, if you have a lot of plants that like that sort of tropical humid environment, get a humidifier. That will be the best consistent way to raise the humidity in your home and make sure you're able to keep it high. But personally, like I said, I don't use one, and it's absolutely fine. It's still living its best life here. personally fertilize my fern leaf every time I water, let's be honest, and throughout the entire year. With the fertilizers that I'm using, which are houseplant-based fertilizers, they are suitable to be used quite frequently. I've used liquid gold leaf before, I'm using Formulex at the minute, and those tend to be fine with regular usage with every watering throughout the year. I also fertilize year-round because I have created an artificial environment with my plants. It is fairly warm, fairly bright, especially with grow lights in my home, so my plant, I found that it keeps growing throughout the year. If yours does slow down or stop growing in the wintertime, I would recommend lowering or stopping fertilizing, but I personally don't do that because I don't see that sort of stoppage within my own home. And also it's good to be aware that if you're using something other than a houseplant focused fertilizer, you might want to dial it back or dilute it to maybe half strength, because there's nowhere for the fertilizer to go outside of this pot. So when you're watering your plants with fertilizer water and it's not specifically suited for houseplants, it can be too concentrated and burn the roots. So if you're using an all-purpose general fertilizer, definitely half strength that, and make sure that it is not too strong for your plant. In nature, jungle cacti like these will be growing on trees, so not really in soil, but like I said earlier, that's not really reasonable for our homes. I don't just have trees for to hang off of, so I have mine in soil, but I'm using anthurium and orchid soil from Soil Ninja. That is perfect for all of the epiphytes and semi-epiphytes you have in your home. Anthurium, orchids, hoyas, jungle cacti, all of those plants will like that sort of similar, very, very chunky soil that's got lots of air in it and can drain really, really well. This one specifically has lots and lots of bark as well as big chunks of zeolite and perlite in it to make sure that it's staying nice and airy and the roots can get enough air and it drains well enough. You can use regular houseplant soil, but I would definitely suggest adding something in there for chunk. Bark specifically is probably the easiest thing to really get it as close as possible to mimicking its natural habitat, given it's not living in a tree. And you probably won't need to repot these all that often, maybe every 2 or 3 years we find. I actually did just repot mine, I think for the first time ever since I got it last year, because I wanted to put it into this new soil mix, and I'm very glad I did because I think it's really liking it in here now. Not that it wasn't liking the soil that it came in, but I just really wanted to switch it to this anthurium and orchid soil, and so far I think it is very, very happy. Propagation of fern leaf cactus is so easy. It's so easy. So all you need to do is take a cutting of your cladode, one of these, and you can cut it pretty much anywhere and just pop that into some soil and keep it fairly moist, a little bit more moist than you would just keeping the plant to help promote root growth. But you can see already on my plant there are some aerial roots just coming off of it in general. I think that is because I have a fairly humid home, but those will grow down into the soil and then you'll just already have a plant like that. I think one section of my plant is that, this part here. You can see it's ever so slightly different in form than the other bits, but this part I grew from a single propagation and it has branched out so much since I've had it. And I'm just absolutely loving it. It's just so easy, and I love that you can propagate them in soil because then you don't need to worry about like transplanting them after you have grown the roots. They're already in their preferred medium to like keep growing in. I suppose you could propagate them in maybe like water or sphagnum as well, but I personally have not tried that with the fern leaf or any jungle cactus. I found just sticking them in soil has been the best route for me with them, and they seem to absolutely love it. Fern leaf cactus are actually cat safe. So if Cleo decided to have a bit of a nibble on this one, it would not be the worst thing in the world. She wouldn't get poisoned. They're not toxic to cats or dogs or humans. I still wouldn't suggest letting your pets nibble on your plants all that much, but if they do, it is not the end of the world. You don't need to immediately bring them to the vet or anything. Also, I find that because I tend to have all of my jungle cactus, this one included, up hanging, I don't really need to worry about them being within reach of Cleo, so she doesn't end up, she doesn't really have access to it. So yeah, they aren't toxic, but I still wouldn't encourage the eating of these plants. So don't eat this one, baby girl. You can lick me instead, yes. So that is it. That is everything you need to know about how to take care of your fern leaf cactus. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and you feel like you can better take care of yours now, or if you were contemplating on whether or not you wanted to get one, know that you should, because honestly, this is one of my favorite plants. What are you doing? This is one of my absolute favorite plants. I don't think my home would be complete without it. So definitely recommend, if you are umming and ahhing about it, get one. Before I go though, I want to say a huge thank you to the newest members of my Good Growing fam, Danny and Catherine. Thank you so much for joining in over there. I really hope you enjoy it on my Patreon. If anybody else is interested in joining my Patreon, it is £3 or about $4.50 a month, about €4, and you get everything for that, including bonus content, live chats with me, you get to vote on video polls, and access to the Discord, and just more access to me in general. I feel like I have a really good relationship with a lot of my patrons, so that's there if you want it, but absolutely no pressure. It's just a bit of fun. So thanks Catherine and Danny for joining in. I hope you love it there. Everybody else, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on other houseplanty things you'd like me to talk about in the future. Any other houseplants you'd like me to make care videos on, let me know down below and I can hopefully make that happen for you, and subscribe for more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to keep growing. Bye!